Thank you very much for having me. It's great to see the full room. I'm really excited about this. For me, it's partially developer experience, it's partially performance improvement, it's partially strategic, it's partially tactical. Flow engineering is kind of the culmination of everything that I learned all the way from starting in tech support to CTO and advising large companies, small companies of all different types. So it really is a collection of different techniques. There's a bunch of different mapping in flow engineering. And really, it's the application of the mapping, what you learn by doing the mapping, that's more important than the maps themselves. But I will take you through all of that. And we're going to start with the idea of individual flow. So I think about flow in a couple different directions or dimensions. The first one that I think everyone is familiar with is kind of the work in the flow state, right? When we get into this groove of working productively and time melts away, and then all of a sudden, it's lunchtime or we're being called to dinner or whatever else interrupts that. That's kind of the ideal productivity, the ideal developer experience, the ideal contributor experience. But as you'll notice, it's kind of made up of these little bursts of time that is actually contributing value to what we're trying to do. And we spend a lot of time struggling through toil and confusion and battling tools and trying to get things working. And what we have to do is really maximize this value at a time. That's part of the exercise of flow engineering. And surprisingly, there's very low single-digit calculations attributed to how much time we actually get to spend in stuff that matters to customers, stuff that matters to our business. We spend so much time really fumbling through processes and friction and approvals and all the other things that get in the way of that flow state. And I've worked with organizations where that number is as low as 2%. And they're more common than you think. It's very rare to see that number very high. And what we're always trying to do is maximize that number. So how do we do it? Flow engineering is kind of targeted at maximizing that number. But even more importantly, the collective sense of flow is really where you start to see the return on investment for these activities. So this idea that everyone working together to deliver value in the organization is part of a chain of activities and this coordination effort that it's necessary to deliver to customers real valuable outcomes. But we see this mix of waiting and producing and battling toil and friction and navigating the organization that slows us down or impacts that time that is value-added time that really unlocks the ROI, the financial outcomes that we're all working towards as part of teams. So how does this manifest itself? We can see some of these effects. So if we start, tracing the path of work through somebody's day or even a release workflow, you'll see that there's a number of different hurdles that pop up in the way that really get between us and productivity or us and effective flow. And so that's just the parts that we can see. But there's many factors that are invisible that even have greater impact. And this is really challenging and really where you get the benefits of mapping. So first of all, we have multiple different perspectives across any value stream, any flow of work in an organization. And that really is a challenge because we are talking different languages in some cases. We're talking past each other, over each other's heads. We're not connecting. We're not understanding each other. And that means that we can be working against each other. Another way that we're directly working against each other is having different goals. Some people are thinking about financial outcomes. Some are thinking about career outcomes. Some are thinking about customer outcomes. And it's very difficult and seldom that we reconcile these things and align them together. And then the last one that I think is also really problematic and challenging is different scopes. So we can be talking short-term versus long-term, big picture versus detail, any number of differences between what scope are we actually talking about. And that's another area where mapping is really powerful and effective. So I've talked about this collective flow of work, the value stream. What does that look like? So if you look at your typical organization, We're delivering value in various places, but the path to delivering that value often traverses many different areas in the organization. We have marketing as a portion of this. We have sales activities. We have operational activities, developmental activities, design, coordination, and they're all part of this flow from idea to value delivery. And we call this a value stream. It's really just a label for something that is holistic and contributing value to customers and delivering value to the organization. But we really only ever have a portion of this visibility available to us at any time, which makes it very difficult for us to understand where is the most impactful improvement opportunity? Where is the proper investment of our resources and our time and our efforts? So how do we avoid micro-optimizing under these circumstances, right? If we look at this overall flow of work from ideation to delivery of value, we have our siloed visibility inside of our department or our sphere of influence, our team, and that's where we often focus our attention to the detriment of the overall performance of the flow, right? In many cases, what you'll get from this micro-optimization is that you'll actually exacerbate the constraint. The conditions that are slowing down the flow of work or impeding the quality or margin of what you're producing can be made worse by not addressing the constraint. So we could be working against ourselves effectively. But even worse, and I think, any individual contributor in the room will recognize a bunch of effort dedicated towards something that they thought was really meaningful, running up against the wall of business or leadership that thinks that this is a complete waste of time, and they just wish that you would focus on this thing over here, right? So they might be right, you might be right, but we don't know unless we look at the entire flow and scrutinize it directly. So how do we do that? So this is just a very, very simple representation of a value stream map that collects specific activities that happen in sequence in order for delivery of value to occur. And some of these things could be happening in parallel. We can show branching here. We can show many, many different dimensions. But the basics are, these are activities that are happening in sequence. We don't want to get too detailed because we don't want to get lost in the weeds. But what we can notice by looking at this basic data, this experience data of the participants who are mapping, is that we have a clear opportunity, right? So we can take everything that we could possibly focus on and forget about 99% of it for now and focus on the thing that is screaming out to us that is obviously a waste, right? Obviously an opportunity. And this depends on multiple factors, obviously, but we discover these opportunities through mapping, through conversations with the participants, through the diversity of perspectives represented across the value stream. So what does this look like? We have multiple different maps in flow engineering for very specific purposes. We start with the identification of value. What are we trying to achieve? What is the outcome that we wish was true? What can we create in the future that will bring us to a better state of performance? So that the initial target outcome is outcome mapping. And I'll take you through some of the detail of that. But it's very important to identify value because it helps us ignore everything else, right? That's incredibly important because we can very easily get lost in the weeds. We can easily forget, what are we doing again? Why do we have 18 people in 18 different directions? Why can't we get on the same page about what we're trying to do? So we get it out of the way first. We invest in initial clarity to kind of set off in the right direction and align everyone to a common goal. That's very important. It's also something that we can bring to leadership and get their buy-in and support on. Then we want to look at the value stream as a way of building clarity on our current state. So understand the current baseline performance and what the current process or flow looks like. And we dig a little bit deeper in that. Where we find a constraint, we will uncover any dependencies that are having an impact on that constraint. So what are the causal factors that are causing the issues that we're seeing in the value stream? And then the future state mapping is really all about, understanding how to create a better system. How do we unlock improved flow and performance across the value stream? And that can be faster, better, sooner, safer, happier. And this all culminates in a flow roadmap that collects all the insights and information that we gather through mapping into something actionable that we can go distribute efforts on and act on what we've learned to make things happen. A lot of people will value stream map and then go back to their jobs and wonder why things don't get better. You have to have something actionable come out of it. And it should be in the form of, what are we going to do today? What are we going to do after? And what can we just forget about for now until those things are done? So we incorporate all this into flow engineering. And the next question that we often get asked is, who's doing this? Who is involved? And I think that one of the most important factors here is executive support. If we want dramatic action, dramatic improvement, investment in automation and change, it's incredibly important to have an executive sponsor who can make space for that, invest in your opportunities, but also help you coordinate with other groups that are typically needed in large scale improvement, right? If you want to have a large impact, you've got to have many players involved in that process. So an executive sponsor can kind of pave the way. It helps to have a facilitator like me who can be somewhat impartial to the process, not steering things in a specific direction, and also somewhat of an expert in navigating the mapping process and guiding the mapping process. You may have coaches in your organization, you might have facilitators in your organization who can do this. And so I would say that you probably have talent in the organization who can act as a facilitator, but it's very important to have someone who's outside of the flow guiding the process of analyzing the flow, because you don't want this to seem like a political exercise or something where someone is putting a thumb on the scale. And then you have representation from across the value stream. So the various roles and stakeholders, you want to have up to a maximum of 10 or 12 people, because you don't want too many chefs in the kitchen. That can help you kind of manage the input and coordination of getting everyone to contribute and managing all the information. And the second question is, where are all these streams, right? So you might think that you have an idea of where these streams are. It might be confusing trying to identify them. I think I take a maximalist stance on this, and I will say that you have streams far beyond product development, far beyond the things that you think are primarily providing value to the business or value to your customers. I see activity flow everywhere in an organization. So from everything from incident response to experimentation, planning, and providing events, you can be working on anything that has a sequential flow of activity and delivers value either internally or externally considered a value stream. And I think it's very helpful to do so because the same practices, the same principles, and the same return on investment applies. You can use the same practices and get incredible results from all of these flows of activity using the exact same process. So to me, that's very helpful. And what does this look like is usually the next question. So that's an example canvas that I will commonly build upon in Mural. This is Mural. There's a bunch of publicly available templates for Miro and Mural, some of the most common platforms for building out collaborative maps. And what we'll do is, through building these iterative segments of stream maps or the various maps, we'll assemble them into this basic flow of outcome, value stream, dependency, future state, and then the flow roadmap. And so you can use any tools that you already have for this. You don't need to go buy something. You can use Post-it notes on a wall. You can use a pad of paper and a pencil. It really doesn't matter, but something that is real-time and collaborative and remote-friendly is an advantage. It really lowers the bar to scheduling these things and getting them done. Another thing about scheduling and getting them done is we target 90 minutes for each of these mapping sessions. We highly constrain them, which forces them to stay out of the weeds, but also makes it easy for you to fit them into a schedule where you have to bring 10 to 12 people together. So we want to lower the bar for mapping so that people do it more often. And there's not such a stigma around, well, this is going to be really expensive and time consuming, so we'll do it once a year, maybe never. Lowering the bar makes it easier to fit into your existing schedule, and it more than pays for itself because you can easily get 20% savings on a current state just by mapping and seeing what it tells you. So overall, we've got this representation of outcome, value stream, dependency, future state, and flow roadmap. And what happens? So we'll see increases in throughput, dramatic increases in throughput. We're cutting lead time in half. We're producing more in less time with less friction. It's more enjoyable as a result of minimizing waste and eliminating friction in the value stream. We lower things like mean time to repair, deployment frequency. People will see DORA metrics reflected here, but there's a lot of leading indicators as well that are impacted by this, as well as lagging indicators. And I think that as a capability, mapping is something that we really should just do more of. So I'm a very big fan of just lowering the bar, lowering the barriers for producing maps so that we can all do them more often. I think that we overcomplicate these things and they become intimidating, or, we think that they have to be perfect. All my maps are very, very simple for the purpose of just making them easier to do and less scary to undertake. So hopefully by the end of the presentation, you feel a little bit more comfortable going and mapping in your organization. The practice of mapping, I think, is extremely underrated because it's a really excellent way of re-engaging with your team or people who you've never really connected to before. There's a lot of mapping sessions that I'll run, and I get the comment afterwards that this is the first time we've ever actually been in the same room together, or even on the same Zoom call together. And I think that's pretty remarkable because you work in the same flow, you depend on each other. So having that first exposure be in a mapping session is pretty remarkable and says something on its own. But it's a way of kind of recommitting to developer experience or contributor experience and saying, we take this seriously, we're looking at it, we want to improve. I think that's very helpful for engagement. It really develops a sense of shared understanding, which is extremely powerful, and the sense of alignment that you get based on that separate perspectives, separate time horizons, separate incentives. Bringing all that together is much easier in a mapping exercise where you can see, here's what this person's talking about, here's what this person's talking about, how can we connect those things together? And then this is not prescriptive in the sense that you will have the same map as anyone else. You won't even have the same map as yourself 6 months in the future, right? These things change as the landscape changes. And that's kind of the value of mapping, but you can see it change over time, and it's going to be tailored to your unique situation. Even in the same team, you could run 2 mapping sessions back to back with 2 separate goals and have 2 different maps, because the goal defines what you look for and what the map ends up looking like. And then you remember all of these things. I mean, it's very difficult to learn all the principles of flow. It's very difficult to learn cycle time, lead time, all these terms. By the time you finish mapping, it anchors itself in your mind, and you really start to see work in terms of flow in a way that you never have before. So I think it's very helpful from that regard. And then, as I mentioned, it's extremely remote friendly. There's no tooling restrictions or access restrictions. I wouldn't recommend trying to do it from a cruise ship, which I did a couple months ago. You do need some internet bandwidth to do this, but otherwise it's extremely accessible. So let's get to the maps, because I'm going to run out of time. So first of all, outcome mapping is really about setting our target and getting really clear as a group on what we're trying to achieve. So the way that we do that is collect a whole bunch of raw data about people's experience in the work today. So it's essentially a big brain dump where everyone just puts all their thoughts and ideas and questions on the board, and we affinity map them. We vote on where we want to focus. And this is a huge alignment exercise. It's a huge clarity building exercise. It really gets us all on the same page, and we can zero in on where we want to go. And this is not where we want to go forever. We're talking about the next 6 months. We're going to implement changes in 3 months, monitor them for 3 months, and then do it again. So even if your favorite target outcome isn't the one that everyone wants to pursue, chances are you're going to get to it because we're going to start moving faster. We're going to start getting things done as a result of this process. So coming out of this raw material gathering, we coalesce all this into a map that represents not only where we want to go, but why we want to go there, what's in the way, and then what are we also going to do? In addition to the rest of the maps and flow engineering, we can go survey different people, we can go have interviews, we can go do assessments of different kinds. Again, not prescriptive. This is just a framework for building out a process improvement, a performance improvement workflow. So then we get into value stream mapping. Again, very, very simple. Basic data really gets you super far with this. You don't need a lot of detail. But we can go into further detail if there's value. We can talk about roles, we can talk about quality, we can talk about different tools and artifacts in the process, inputs and outputs. You can layer on a lot of data on this, but starting with the basic timing data gets you a long ways towards focusing on a specific area. And so we represent, some of the most consequential information here is what is the total time that it takes to go through the entire flow? And then how much of that time is actually just waiting around? Because the waiting time is usually your highest return on investment, lowest hanging fruit to target. This is an example of a current state value stream map in a financial institution. This is a value stream that's worth $2 million of operational cost that we eventually cut in half. And we did this in a couple of days without changing any process, just by decoupling things and running things in parallel that didn't need to be run sequentially. So we designed an optimal flow for this with very, very minimal changes to the organization, just changes to coordination, just changes to how people communicate and collaborate together. So very low lift, very high ROI for activities like this. And what happens when we start to look at streams, people often ask, well, we have hundreds of these streams. Maybe we even have thousands of these streams. We're going to map them all. Well, you don't have to map them all. You can map a couple and start to see common constraints and common issues. Wherever you fix one thing, you fix it everywhere, right? And this is part of the magic of things like platforms and common improvements that are leveraged by multiple teams. So this is a possibility when you're thinking about, well, we don't really want to do this times 1,000 teams. You don't necessarily have to, but eventually what you can do is build this capability into the teams and have the teams doing this on their own continuously whenever it works for them. So next we have dependency mapping. We will take our value stream map and the constraint that is highlighted in the value stream map and understand, why is that happening? What is behind the numbers there? What is the detail that is explaining that condition, so that we can then go dig into what might actually address the constraint. So again, we could have that level of detail across the entire value stream and have 100, 150 stages, but we're only digging deeper where there's gold, right? Where we see signs of gold, we dig for gold. We don't dig everywhere. We're not strip mining for everything that we can possibly dredge up. And this is very important because often in organizations, how many people have done a value stream map where it was just like enormous at the end and like no one wanted to look at it ever again? Yeah, this happens. It's a classic because the level of detail, it's very enticing to go dig deep because we're curious people. We want to understand things. But really, I think the magic is in finding the highest leverage detail that is going to pay off. So we try to constrain that by focusing just on the constraint. And then we can always expand but it's very difficult to contract, right? Once you have the detail, your eyes are going to glaze over. You're never going to be able to go back to something a little bit simpler. So starting simple is essential. And so once we have this explanation of what is really happening in there, we can dig a little bit deeper on the constraints in that process. So we're kind of just going a level down and trying to understand what are the reasons. So you can do 5 whys analysis on this. You can use all your current techniques for understanding the causes of challenges. But this is really just to give us just enough detail to act, just enough insight to act. And then our future state map is really a reimagining of this overall process, addressing the constraint with the knowledge that we've gained by doing all the mapping so far. So we can come up with ideas about how we might address the issues, the complications, the friction, the delays in the value stream, in the constraint. And we can come up with stuff that's outside as well. If it comes to mind and it seems valuable and we can make a case for it, you could have stickies all over the place. And then you can imagine what is the actual impact of those, what is the return on investment for those changes, so that we can make a case to leadership about here's what we need to make this happen and here's the benefits if we do. And the flow roadmap really takes all that raw information of what could we do? What are the things that are going to pay off, and puts them into context so that we can appropriately lay them out over a timeline, so that we can appropriately plan them and execute them. So this is a very simple prioritization matrix. You can use whatever you currently use, and it just helps us sort out now, next, later. That's the framework for, I think, any good roadmap, and that's what we use in flow road mapping. We take now, next, and later, and we'll take all those actions. This is a very simplified version, but we'll plot first the milestones and actions. So the things that we're going to implement, the changes that we're going to make, the investments that we're going to make, the bets that we're making. And then we also want to understand, how do we know that we're headed in the right direction? So measures of progress is about understanding what is going to tell us that we need to pivot, or that we are done, or that we need to pull in some help. So that is going to be connected to oftentimes metrics, but it can also be milestones. It could be things that we achieve that tell us that we are heading in the right direction and we can proceed, or we need to speed up, or we need to go call in some help, or we need to invest in something different. And then finally, I think it's very important to have ownership on a roadmap. Your product owner isn't the person who owns everything. I think that performance improvement is everyone's job, but if it's everyone's job, then it's nobody's job at the same time, right? So we get really specific about who's going to be the leader of that, who's going to make sure that we're making progress, who's going to report on that progress, who's going to make the decision on whether we pivot to a different direction. And that really just builds this level of clarity and actionability that takes you from, oh, we have a value stream map and nothing really happened with it, to, yeah, we made a value stream map, but it really just informed a set of actions that resulted in performance improvement, right? The value stream map is not the goal. The outcome is the goal. So I think it's really important to leverage a roadmap coming out of all these mapping techniques to make the outcomes happen and to deliver the results. So what happens as a result of this? We bring those separate perspectives together. We're using mapping the whole time. Every one of these mapping workshops is bringing people closer into alignment, closer into a shared understanding. We're unifying the goal around a common target outcome, which again is just the next 6 months. We can pick something new 6 months later. We can do multiple in parallel if we have the capacity, but it's so super important to have that alignment on a common goal, because otherwise we're just naturally pulling in different directions. And talking about the same time horizon, the same level of detail, the same material, the same value stream is really important, and something that we can leverage going forward. We can use these maps as a reference as we're changing process and implementing things like automation to check back and say, have we missed something? Now that we've implemented this or we've learned this, does that change how we interpret the map? And so having the maps is a great resource as a reference, but it also helps you tell a story of here's where we were and here's where we are now, and we're going to carry that forward. So in terms of communicating results and ROI to leadership, I think it's very powerful for that. So it can also serve as a really helpful on-ramp for things like larger initiatives. So if you're undertaking a migration project or a large-scale implementation, a huge initiative, maybe you've acquired a company and you have a huge mountain of integration work to do or onboarding or alignment work, you can map together and all of a sudden that path to better becomes very clear. So I think that's very powerful. Again, building alignment, even if this is company to company, you can map together and bring that together. And then this engagement problem, I mean, contributor disengagement is an epidemic, right? It's a real big problem. Bring people together to map allows them to share their perspective and feel heard and feel like they're a part of building a solution and building something better, getting them out of the friction and the waste and the pain that they feel on a regular basis. So I think that's really, really powerful. So last thing I'll leave you with is a recap all the way from outcome to flow roadmap. What we're trying to do, identify value, build clarity, and ultimately enable flow. But you can't enable flow unless you have clarity and a clear sense of value. So I would emphasize the importance of covering all these areas because I think we dive right to flow. We want flow. That's the thing that we're going towards. But it really relies on this foundation of value and clarity. And if you want to learn more about that or more about the foundations of flow engineering, the origins of it, the different practices involved, there's a ton of information in the book, but there's also a ton of information online, many, many talks and resources. So I encourage you to go take a look and adopt it in your organization, remix it, tell me about what you learn. I would love to hear it. So thanks very much for showing up.